Yeah, one of the things I think about often is kind of just the socioeconomic component of this, where the education component is so huge, but there's also just the reality of the situation where food prices are going up. And I'd
Yeah.
be curious to just get your take on kind of just articulating and decomposing, deconstructing food prices in general. Like, how do you articulate that to your customers?
Yeah, yeah. So, one thing I'm an advocate for is, eat less meat but better meat. So that's one sort of position that I have pretty strongly. I think we eat, a lot of meat that is, if you're eating like chicken nuggets in the shape of a dinosaur, I mean, like there's just like a lot of mindless meat consumption, I would say.
Totally.
Uh, and so, but better meat that's more nutrient dense, all for that. Less of it, yeah, I'm also okay with that too. Um, and then I also think that, I mean, one thing. Then this is, if you look at the price of a Snickers bar per pound, I think it's around like $15 a pound. So to me, it is a matter of like, like if you look at grass-fed ground beef, maybe it's 10, 11, $12 a pound, depending on where you're getting it. And, so a Snickers bar, when you compare it nutritionally, is going to be a lot less nutritionally dense than a pound of grass-fed beef. And so that's, I think some of it too is about prioritizing, what's
Mhm.
important to you. And also, people getting better at cooking is something, like cooking, more cooking at home is something that was a big thing that happened during the pandemic. It's waned a bit for sure because restaurants are open. I love restaurants. Everybody loves restaurants, but there was just so much more cooking at home during that period. That was a really exciting thing to me, is to see that piece. But I think there's, food is, I mean, another thing that I think, another sort of perspective I have on this, that I believe it was in one of Michael Pollan's books. He gave a stat. I don't remember the exact numbers, but back in the 50s, we were paying about 18% of our income for food, and like 7% for healthcare. Right.
Mm.
Well, today we're doing just the opposite. We're paying 18%. Like, food is as cheap as any. We have the cheapest food in anywhere in the developed world, as a percent of income, and but we're paying almost 18 or 20% of our income on healthcare. And
Right.
so that switch to me is just, I mean, we're basically going to a processed food diet, really cheap food, lots of, filled with lots of fillers, grain, sweetener, and and then we're having to pay a big chunk of money on our for healthcare because of that. And to me, I would much rather pay more for food that tastes better and is healthier for me, than and pay less for healthcare. And so I think it's a matter of priorities, and also, like we've just created a lot of really easy, cheap food that is. I know it's gone up over the past, couple of years with inflation, but it's still cheap compared to the rest of the world, the developed world. And so much of it's empty calories that, is not, is actually, you know, is not good for you. And so, to me, those are kind of things I think of when I think about, the economics of food, and how, um, you know, like, is cheap meat really that cheap? I mean, it's cheap in some ways. Yeah, sure, it might be cheaper for, just on face value, but when you think about um, the the health impacts of it, the environmental impacts of it. This is what going back to what I said early on in the conversation. I mean, we have a food system that prioritizes producing the cheapest possible meat or food out there. Just how, the cheaper the better. Nothing else really matters, right?
Mm.
And we want to take care of the environment. We want to make sure farmers and the food workers, the processing plant, can make a decent living doing this. We want to make sure that customers have a really, really nutrient dense, healthy product. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to mitigate climate change. So we're baking that into our system because we value that. And sure, our stuff costs more, but it's still, our grass-fed beef is still cheaper per pound than a Snickers bar. So
Hmm. Yeah, I love that stat.
yeah,
Um,
it's pretty wild. I mean, I every time I say, like, every couple of years I'll go back and look, and like it's still like, it's all price per ounce there. But
yep.
it's and if it's not like they're like either right neck and neck or grass-fed beef's a little bit cheaper. I don't think I've ever seen it where grass-fed beef is more expensive than a Snickers bar per pound.
Yeah. Yeah, it's highlights what you're talking about too, which is on a dollar per nutrient dense
Yes.
basis is really how we should be thinking about this,
Yeah.
where if
Yep.
you're trying to fuel yourself for good health and avoid some of these negative health outcomes that come from eating highly processed foods, you
Yep.
should be investing on the front end, which obviously is maybe a little bit more painful, but on the back end, you're living a healthier life. You feel much better. You're able to invest your energy into things that are actually meaningful, as
Yep.
opposed to getting trapped up in this system that seems to like start with education, go into kind of different models of, how we create food, how we, just go about working. And
Yep.
then, on the back end of that is usually some pretty negative health outcomes. So,
That's
uh,
right. Yeah, and we spend a ton of money on like, medicine, health supplements. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, take some health supplements. I think um, but start with really, start your base should be a really healthy diet
yeah,
and looking for foods that are nutrient dense and the way it's raised. And like one thing we like to say is not just what you eat, but what you eat eats. That's important, right?
totally.
And so really like, I mean, we spend a lot of money on food and really taking that seriously and trying to educate yourself on, well, where can I get, what is going to be the most nutrient dense beef or pork or carrot out there. And so I think that's really one of the things that can help push more consumer adoption of this. Is the more there's a guy out there named, I think his name is Dan Kittredge. If you haven't heard of him, he'd be a great
Yep.
person to have on this podcast.
Yep.
But someone who's doing a lot of work to develop. I think he's working on like this little spectrometer that a customer could take in if they wanted to, and like do a little, carrot, like take a carrot and be able to measure its nutrient density. And to me, I think that's really, health benefits, and be able for consumers to really see that nutrient density is going to be something that has a lot of power to drive more consumers to be looking this direction.